Well, I want to get started, and I want to thank everybody for joining us again today. Thank you for the work that you're doing in your districts. I think I say it at the beginning of every one of these and almost every meeting I go to right now, but hats off to all of you for the last 2 years and the work that you've done and the kind of shots that you've taken as school board members. I know that it's not been an easy time, and I touched on this I think when we were last together, but I'm going to touch on it at every one of these. We want to encourage all of you that are up for election this fall to consider sticking with it. It's a time where I've had a couple of reporter calls in the last couple of weeks on school board elections. Hearing about people that are filing to run, and kind of there's that mentality I think in some districts of throw the bums out that are currently there, that a new crop will do better. And I don't know that they understand fully what being a school board member is, or what the work is that you do. But it's a reality that I think a lot of districts are going to see competition in elections this year. We have approximately 1,500 seats that will be up for election this year. I think as our cycle goes, this is probably one of our slightly higher years than that. Normally we would turn over of that 1,500, about half of them, 700 or so, would be a pretty normal year for us. I'm going to expect that that's going to be a bit higher this year. But I would encourage you, as you are all looking at your districts, if you have openings, incumbents that are leaving, that you really do a job of recruiting. And I'm not saying to recruit a specific person, but I think it's an incumbent and a responsibility for your boards to get out there and actually think about what you want in candidates. Talk to your local chambers. I was just in a lunch meeting with some business folks from West Michigan recently, talking about that very thing, like recruiting. It was in one of the associations over there, and I was saying, how do you convince your business owners, both themselves and their employees, to run for school board? That we want to get people that are leaders sitting on our school boards, people that are engaged in our business community, that have a vested interest in what knowledge kids have when they come out of school. And we're going to try to work together a little bit this summer to have some more conversations in that space. But think of your chambers and your Rotaries and your Lions clubs and your PTAs, but reach out to them, talk to them about candidates, and talk to them about what you're looking for. I think if you wait until the file or past the filing deadline and just say, oh, people will file and we'll have people that are interested in running, I think you're absolutely right. But as much as MASB enjoys the business, doing more facilitating of board relationships that aren't working so well is not something we want to do more of. We would rather be in a place where our boards and soups are working together. And I do see a future where we have a lot of board consternation in the next cycle. So think a lot about that. We have Brad and DeShandria on with us today to talk legal and legislative stuff with all of you. Jen Smith, who is normally with us, is dealing with some family emergency issues this week, so she is not with us, but we are in capable hands with DeShandria covering legislative things and answering questions for all of you. A couple of other topics that I'll cover before kind of opening it up to questions, or maybe even asking Brad and DeShandria a couple of questions. You will see tomorrow a campaign called For My Kids, For My Schools that's going to start up. MASB is a part of that. And that is, in essence, a decline to sign petition campaign. As you all know, the Board of Canvassers last month approved language that is an initiative petition to bring about, for lack of a better word, vouchers in Michigan. MASB, through our resolutions process, has a firm resolution opposed to vouchers and tuition tax credits. Clearly, this initiative petition is a result of legislation that went through the legislature last year that the governor vetoed at our request. They are now going to get signatures. And unlike what we all think about as normal ballot initiatives, and this is one of the things that our campaign is talking about, the For My Kids, For My Schools campaign, is that this doesn't get to go to, we don't get to go to the voters with this. I think we'd have a different conversation if we got to have a fair fight and make our pitch to the voters just like their campaign would. But this is an initiative petition that if they can get enough signatures, and they will use paid petition signature gatherers, and I don't begrudge them that. That's what most campaigns use now. But they will collect their signatures, and it will go to the legislature, the same legislature that passed this legislation in the fall. And if they pass it again, the governor cannot veto it and will become law without a vote of the people, and it will be changing Michigan's constitution. And so, you know, we really feel if we want to have this conversation about vouchers in Michigan, or tax credits in Michigan, let's have that conversation, but let's have it with the voters of Michigan, not just between paid signature gatherers and then if they get them, the legislature of Michigan. So you'll see more coming out of MASB, the campaign itself. We are not running it, we are just a part of it. There's a press conference tomorrow that will launch it, and we will start sharing information with school board members. I think you can expect to see model resolutions for boards that would like to take positions opposed to the petition gathering process right now, trying to get it to actually go to the people. If the legislature were to turn it down, which would be really our request, then we would have a ballot issue that would go to the voters. And it's the voters' place to decide that. So know that that's going on. Howard, I actually see you have your hand up. I'm assuming it's on this issue. We'll see what you're asking.
It is. I just wanted to tell the group here. You said that this would change the Constitution, and that is not correct. This is not a constitutional amendment. This is purely a resolution that would then become a bill and a law. It would conflict with the Michigan Constitution and very likely would generate a lawsuit, which would go up to the Michigan Supreme Court saying that this law is unconstitutional against the Michigan Supreme Court. They would need to require additional signatures to actually do a constitutional amendment. And then that, by definition, must go to the people. That cannot be vetoed or approved by the state legislature.
That was my mistake, Howard. I knew what I was saying. I just didn't say it the right way.
If I can add on, Don, just so you guys know the name of the ballot petition that's out there, it's Let My Kids Learn. They need to collect 344,000 signatures. The lobbyists do think that they will get the signatures. So we are trying to be proactive and talk to the legislators who, before the governor vetoed it and said no to it, to the vouchers in the legislation. We are trying to get to them to see if it does go back to the legislature, if they get enough signature, that they will continue to say no, just so you guys know. And just from a grassroots perspective, we are hearing on the, as petition collectors are out there, that they are telling people that this is for special education services. This is to help our community. So there's no law that, stops them from lying or, kind of change the narrative out there. So just in case you guys, are approached by someone. So just definitely, because there are about 6 or 7 ballot initiatives out there right now in circulation. And that's also a thing with the timing. If they get the signatures by June, we think that they will take it to the legislature before November, before elections. So that definitely, we hope that not all of them go to the governor before then, but we do see them pushing before election season.
Thank you for that, Deshandra. Yeah, this campaign is multi-pronged just because we don't know what the end result is going to be, whether it's going to be, they don't get the signatures, although I think most of us agree with Deshandra that we expect the signatures will be gathered. And their deadline is early June, and that can extend. They just lose signatures on the front end. We expect that they will get to the signatures that they need. Then it will be trying to campaign with the legislature to get them not to vote for it. And then we may have a fight at the ballot. So like it's a long process that will keep you engaged on. Howard is right as he brought up that issue. If we are unsuccessful from a decline to sign and a legislative perspective, and the legislature passes it, you can expect that MASB and a cadre of others will file suit, because we do think it's in direct contradiction to our current Constitution. In fact, we haven't even updated, Brad's going to update our board of directors on Friday at our board meeting. We just received final ruling from a court case that has now been out there for about 5 years. MASB and a group of others sued the state of Michigan on a $5 million appropriation for items that the legislature under Governor Snyder said were for health and safety. And we ran that all the way to the Michigan Supreme Court and got stuck in a weird space where we had a person that decided to declare a conflict, so she couldn't vote. She had been an attorney under Governor Snyder. And we ended up with a tie vote on the Supreme Court, which is a pretty rare happening. And a tie vote dropped it back to the Court of Appeals. Their initial decision, in essence, on many points said that our arguments lost. The Court of Claims just issued their final decision. They went through line item by line item, those items that would be funded by this. I think we feel good about the final conclusion, in the sense that, yes, some things are going to get funded under this. Some of the most costly items, like nutrition programs and other things at private schools, which they consider a fundamental part of offering that education, remains an expense for the private school. But it is, in the end, that puts another little chink in the armor of our constitutional language. I think this one, the same cast of characters and maybe a bigger group would end up suing on this. And I think ultimately the goal of course, this is one that's being pushed again by Betsy DeVos and others in the anti-public education space. They would like to see, if not, they would like to just see it happen. But if we're going to fight it, they want to see it to go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. We've had 2 decisions in the last half a dozen, maybe 5 years, in Montana and Missouri in this space. We call it dealing with what we call Blaine amendments, language in the Constitution that was that came about from years and years ago. And we have probably one of the best written Blaine amendments in the country. Both Missouri and Montana lost in that space and now have vouchers, at least in a limited fashion, in those states. So they want to run ours all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, hoping with a favorable court that maybe our Constitution will be deemed unconstitutional under the U.S. And open the door. So lots to come on this voucher tuition tax issue. But just know that this is one that we will deal with from a legislative and voting perspective, and then we'll move it to the legal perspective, and it will move slowly in the legal process. As I said, we're about 5 years in to this local kind of Michigan state decision, so we can expect both the cost will be substantial. I would expect that in the most recent court case that we've been in, between all sides participating, it's been a case that's probably cost north of $2 million. And MASB did not foot that whole bill, but we did foot a nice chunk of it. And I think if we have to go to the courts all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, something like this will cost even more. But that's what you have an association for, is to try to fight those fights for you at the court levels and at the legislative level. Brad, I see you posted in the chat that you have a question from somebody that's on.
Yes, I do. Thanks, Don. And an interesting question relating to personal social media pages of school board members, and what type of, I guess, free speech or First Amendment issues may come into play with your own social media page. So in this case, a board member is getting complaints from groups or individuals about blocking those individuals or blocking those groups from the personal social media page. And the issue then is, okay, well, are you violating those individuals' First Amendment rights by blocking them because you are a public official? But are you acting as a public official when you have a personal social media page? And now this case didn't go all the way up to the Supreme Court, but a Court of Appeals case, looked at the social media page of former President Trump, and where he would block individuals and whether he was violating those individuals' First Amendment rights by blocking them. And that court did establish and determined that yes, as President of the United States, the Constitution, First Amendment, would apply to his social media page, particularly because he used it as kind of like a presidential platform. But as a board member, I mean, if you're, kind of using that sporadically and for your board members' communications, it's likely not gonna, be like a public official page that where you would have the First Amendment apply to it. Clearly, if your board has a social media page that's sponsored by the school district and it's called the Waterville Board of Education Facebook page, then the First Amendment would apply, and you would have to be very, very careful about restricting messages and blocking individuals from that social media page. But if your social media page is purely personal, and I guess I would say more personal than public in terms of what you post on it, I think you would be safe in blocking individuals who wish to reach out to you as a board member, even though that is your personal social media page. But you have to be careful. If you use it to discuss a lot of school district business, it could be argued that the First Amendment would apply to that page, and then you would have to be very careful on what type of comments you would restrict and who you would block from that page. So hopefully that's good information on the issue and answers the question that was presented to me.
Brad, I actually saw a follow-up, but it was one I was going to ask, and then Christine asked. A number of our board members start with a Facebook campaign page when they're running for school board, and sometimes still use that as their communication tool. Would you consider that more in the professional space and harder to really create a block because most of it is school board related?
I think campaigning is more of a personal matter rather than a school district matter, in my opinion. So, for example, if you're subject to a recall, or let's say 4 board members are subject to a recall, the Open Meetings Act allows those 4 board members to get together and strategize how to defeat that recall, and you don't have to post that 4 board member gathering as a meeting under the Open Meetings Act, because that is seen as political. And it's not, really related to your duties and responsibilities as a school board. And that's another reason why, your district's legal counsel, can't assist in defending against that recall petition, because it's more personal to you as a board member. So, yeah, I would say I'm not aware of any clear precedent on that issue, but in my opinion, a campaign social media page is still more personal than public. And I don't believe the First Amendment would apply to that.
So Brad, I see Susan had her hand up, but then I see she posted. So Susan, if you want to jump on and do it, on live, you can, but ask a question about a Facebook page that's titled maybe, President Jill Fennessy or something along those lines. So it's really designating their more official role.
And also, the president title is speaking on behalf of the board. And I think there was a case, I don't know if it was a school board or county official, but think it was 2017, maybe. I can't look it up real quick. I have a little one. But yeah, it was a lower level official, sorry, more local official, who was using their Facebook page, and I think got in trouble for that as well. When you're posting like, here's the board, here's the next board meeting, or things like that. I don't know if that made sense.
Brad, your thoughts?
Well, I think you have to be careful anytime you're engaging in social media communications as a board member. Obviously, you have the Open Meetings Act issues, you have FOIA issues, and then you have this First Amendment issue. If you're titling your social media page as president of the Board of Education, yeah, that may tip the scales to making it more public than private. Obviously, if this issue goes before a court is going to take a number of facts, elements into consideration in making the determination, whether the First Amendment protections would apply, to that social media page. And I did recently, I mentioned FOIA, and there was a recent court case on a public official's social media page, and whether those private communications were subject to FOIA, because this person was a public official, but it was his personal social media page. And the court in that case determined, even though this person was a public official, it was a private page, and those communications, were personal in nature, so they were not subject to FOIA. But the court did clarify that if those communications would have been related to his position as a public official, even though it was on a personal page, those social media comments would have been subject to FOIA.
Brad, I'll just add this is a topic that comes up, and we've done clinics and work sessions on it. The whole social media dynamic, it's one of the reasons, and I think a lot of board members feel a need to inform their constituents about what's happening at the district or what's happening at the board level. And we would often say, if your district has a page, like, that is the most effective and safest way to communicate actions the board has taken and actions that are going on in the school district, so that in fact you're not in this place where you have to decide, is my page a little bit too much school board oriented or is it not? Like, if most of the communications from your district about board activity comes from the district page, and the only activity that you have on your page is your own personal views on things, or you might answer a question that pops up from somebody that says, hey, I heard about this, what's the answer from a school board perspective? It puts you just in a much cleaner place, so that it's not going to be confusing, that if somebody were to challenge it, as Brad is bringing up, that you can easily point at your page and say, no, all of the professional communication that goes on about the district comes out of our district. If I have any comments about school board stuff, it's me answering a question. That it just keeps the lines much brighter, and you wouldn't have to deal as much with this. Although I think this is an issue that's, because many people do, veer more in that direction. I think these are good questions, and it was good talking about it as well. Ken, you had a question on we've got some proposals out there and some bills moving on gas tax relief. I'm going to turn to Deshandri and ask about, what is the impact from the school aid fund perspective if they do a temporary waiver or of the gas tax?
Well, right now, I'll start with, there's two proposals out there. So Governor Whitmer has proposed a federal gas tax relief. So basically that'll be the 18 cents on gas, and then also 24 cents on diesel. Michigan gets more gas than diesel. Her proposal is to basically give relief while also trying to protect the funds that are going to the roads and bridges. So that's Governor Whitmer's proposal. And then the legislature has a proposal. So it's House Bill 5570. which would basically give also relief as well for 6 months. So it'll start April, if passed, it'll start April and go from September 2022. And they are trying to get rid of the 27.2% for the gas tax. They haven't really talked about the 6%. Today there was a joint committee. So the 6%, so the 27.2 cents goes to roads and bridges, and the 6% goes to schools and local governments. There hasn't been a lot of talk about the 6% other than today there's starting conversations. So we really haven't been put in a place where we kind of have to act or, have concern, but there is rhetoric out there that with the 6%, the sales tax will, so there's enough money. So there's $4 billion in the state surplus to basically backfill. So if we do put the pause, so if the legislation were to pass for the Republican legislation, it would basically end up with $750 million hole. But there is enough money in our state surplus, $4 billion to backfill that. So that's the Republican legislature's plan. So it wouldn't impact roads or bridges or any kind of infrastructure in that way. But in reality, the real number is it would only basically save taxpayer dollars $75 within this time frame. So basically it's a $750 million hole for $75. It wouldn't impact school aid funds so far, but I think there you do get into the slippery slope of there's the conversation of, well, if it's sales tax, and if we take away the sales tax on gas, which will go to the school aid fund, it can be replaced by other taxes. So say if you go buy a sweater or something else or a car, they would get the sales tax that way. So that's kind of the rhetoric that you hear out there. But one of the beauties of the gas tax, the sales tax on gas for us specifically is it is very volatile. And, the higher the cost of gas, the more that goes in the school aid fund. So that's kind of the information that and the rhetoric that's going on out there. So it really hasn't significantly impacted the school aid fund. But I think the concern right now is with those construction and road projects that are happening currently, if we do the state pause on gas tax, what would happen to those construction projects right now on the roads?
Thanks, Deshandria. Jeff, you asked a question about as it related to kind of new board members, and you say, what about offering a free 101 to prospective new board members? And this may eliminate people with the wrong perception from running. So we're trying to go a little bit in that direction. We have over the last election cycle. In June, we have, I think, 4 statewide virtual town hall meetings for anybody interested in running for school board. And in those meetings, we try to explain the role of a board member, of course, talk to them what it means to run, what it's like, what their responsibilities are, just to give them a good feel for what they're getting into. And it's not to dissuade anybody. Frankly, when we started this, it was to encourage people to run for school board. And I think that's where we still are as an association. We want people that are student-focused, civic-minded people running for boards of education. We need good people to govern our school districts and be the liaison between the superintendent and the community. So we want to encourage it. So it's not a free 101 training per se, because I don't think we could get anybody, even as a candidate, to sit through that much time. So we're doing these town hall meeting formats to really give that same opportunity. We will be sharing those with our membership so that you can actually put that information out and let people know in your community that they're being held. And you can, if you know people that are running, you'll be able to share so that you can share with them that here's where they can get more information. There's no charge. It's going to be open to anybody. So just know that that's out there, but I appreciate the suggestion with that. Brad, let's see. Deshandra just posted the gas tax bill is being sent to the governor today. And likely we're hearing that it will likely be a veto not supporting losing that large amount of money as it would affect road funding. Mary, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Don. Thanks for everybody at MASB for hosting this again. You're talking about the townhouse for potential school board candidates. You think that it sounded like you were saying that even current incumbents could benefit from something like this?
I think anybody that, I mean, it's open, so anybody could sign up for it. I think for current board members, there's probably less knowledge for you. Like, I don't know that we're going to talk about, we're not going to give you tips and tricks on how to run a campaign. So, that would be one. I was just in a conversation with a board member on that very topic. And in that case, it wasn't MASB, it was me personally, because it's a board member in my own community. But really talking about like, okay, I think this year is going to be an interesting year, and getting a voter list and figuring out, who regularly votes, and, trying to make it a campaign. I think I said in the last Member Matters, there is a fundraising threshold by which I think it's $1,000. Brad, you could correct me if I'm wrong on that. But if you expect to spend more than $1,000, that you should create a campaign committee. And I would recommend to anybody right now that it doesn't take much work to create one. And if you don't collect that much money, you're completely fine. But create one so that if you need to raise money for more yard signs or do other things, so we haven't thought about really talking about a campaign seminar for our board members. If that was something that people thought was worth talking about, then we could always offer that as a virtual type event, even for our current members as well.
Thanks. I just had a quick follow-up for DeShandria. It sounds like this campaign to put the gas tax on hold is all just a lot of political show. You're saying an average household person savings of $75? So there's really just a lot of show around this, a lot of numbers being thrown around, but it's really not gonna make a huge impact for individuals.
No, it's not. From committee today, basically said it was $75, and some of the committee members said so $750 million for $75 for our taxpayers. So it just doesn't equate. I think the governor's proposal, she's more so trying to get the gas under $4. So that's more of her rhetoric, and she's trying to do the federal tax because it is a way to preserve the funding to the roads, other than the state gas tax, which is completely cuts the funding to the roads. But the plan is to backfill it with state surplus. So the state funds that we are in flux right now, they would backfill it in hopes that there won't be a $750 million deficit. So that's the plan.
It's DeShandra was talking about the gas tax, but we saw, and both sides are doing this. The governor in in her budget talked about the pension tax and talked about other changes in taxes here in Michigan. Then the legislature starts moving with corporate income tax and personal income tax. I mean, I don't think anybody will deny that with inflation and the rising price of gas, that there's some tight belting going on in a lot of our families. And so it's not, MASB or anybody being, not thinking about the troubles that are out there for people. And if we're talking about pensions on, people on fixed incomes, but there always is this impact to who we advocate for, which is the funding streams for all of you. And it's an election year. And so it's not surprising that the governor's throwing out her tax cuts and the legislature's throwing out their tax cuts. Some of it is, I think, purely for politics. Some of it is clearly they believe it's the right way to go. But, as we look at it, and, I think that the tough spot for everybody right now is there's so much federal money sitting in the state of Michigan, much of what we still need to get appropriated. And so both voters and the legislature says, we have all this money, why wouldn't we cut taxes? And it's for this very same reason that when you say, as a district, you have all this money, why wouldn't I give raises to my teachers? It's because that money is one-time money that you're not going to have in the future to sustain that raise. Well, this federal money is also not sustainable. So when they give a gas tax cut or any tax cut for that matter, if it's permanent, the federal money goes away and then the hole is there in the future. And so It's the same reason we urge that our legislature not go down this road unless it's kind of very targeted and something that is sustainable. And I know we can argue about that, but it's we're just trying to figure out, and we've been consistent. Jen really carries this, and DeShandria does as well over the years. Pretty much any tax cut that goes back on the promise of Proposal A and what taxes the voters voted on in 1993 to say, here's what schools are supposed to get. We will typically oppose that tax cut, saying that that's going back on what the voters thought was going to be designated to school funding. And trust me, we've actually not been successful on the argument many times. And so, how much we've lost since Proposal A is in the billions and billions of dollars. So I see a couple of posts here. Mark posts, everything that they say dollars are there to backfill, however they run out. Yes, I think everybody's now promising this money. We've spent it about 6 times through both tax cuts and expenditures. And we were actually in a meeting yesterday with some higher education folks. And we were, at one point some school people were signing on a letter supporting a program in higher ed. And eventually we realized that we were also telling the governor and the legislature, we wanted that same pot of money spent somewhere else. And so we had to we're still allies on many things, but we're not going to sign on to that letter because we're trying to spend the same money doing 2 different things. So Mark, you are absolutely right. Bob just posted Michigan Senate just passed a halt on the gas tax. So that will, we're just going to see where the tax issues go, and we'll keep you informed. And that's all we can do in this space. We may see a situation, depending on what tax it is, where we send an alert for those that want to, take it on and call their legislators and give your opinion. And we don't do that on every piece of legislation. So we'll just, we'll do it based on the seriousness, what we expect the governor to do, if she has tipped her hand on veto or not veto. And we definitely have been talking about the larger tax package and saying that one is problematic for us. So Brad, I think you posted that you had another topic that you wanted to touch on.
Yeah, so last week I got a call from a board member, and I'm not sure if this person is participating today, but this person asked if I was aware of a common strategy that school districts have been employing in responding to inaccurate information posted on social media. And so I'm putting that out there to the group, of whether your boards or your school districts. I know we have some superintendents on the webinar today. So I'm interested in hearing, whether any districts have looked at a strategy in responding to misinformation that's been posted in your community about the school district on social media. I mean, from my perspective, I think it's difficult. If you respond, you're kind of going down a slippery slope, right? Because you can't respond to everything, and then if you respond to something, one message and not the other, how are people to read into that? So to me, it's a pretty complicated issue. So I'm wondering how districts have addressed that. It's not really a legal issue, but as social media becomes more prevalent in our society, it's certainly a communication issue of how your school district is responding to that type of misinformation.
Anybody like to share? I know there is strategies out there for districts. Anybody would like to share what they do in their district if a person posts on social media something about the district or something that you see as false information, how your district addresses that, or if they address that?
Don, I would like to speak just for a moment. It wasn't on social media, but we had an email come into all board members as well as the superintendent about a sale of property of a closed building that we have. And the person made the promise that they'd be at the next board meeting, and we had our staff personally contact him if he gave us his phone number. When he sent the email to us, he just listed his name and of course we had his email address, but we wanted to personally go face to face and talk with that person. And so the meeting has taken place, and it just was a nice strategy. If we have a phone number, we like to call directly to that person so we can have a conversation.
Now, Catherine, in that example, did you then, were you able to, in a public way, kind of address the comments so that it was clarified?
It was clarified through a response from myself, because I'm board president, as well as my superintendent asking to have a meeting. And then the phone number was quickly given, and it was appreciated by the person who sent us the original email.
Okay. Did I see Richard Hill have his hand up at one point? You might want to.
So Don, and Brad, I'm glad you brought this up, because I've seen this throughout the year where a mom or dad will post something on social media. It's typically regarding a particular building, an event, or a teacher, and the comment is absolutely false. It's just, there's no accuracy, there's no truth to it. And I've seen board members, I've seen school officials, even teachers respond to try to mitigate the rumor, the comment. So when Brad brought up, is there any district that has a strategy? I'm listening, because I think it's appropriate that we as a board sit down with our superintendent and discuss this. I'm not sure we have a strategy.
So Richard, I will, and I see Lauren, you have your hand up, but James respond or posted, and I think this is it's going to vary depending on what gets posted, right, Richard? So like if it's somebody making a comment about a teacher or a classroom, I think you do run into, it's harder, and you could be in a total response mode all the time. But James points out what I think was a good approach in their situation. They had changed a policy regarding busing. Then online, people started, going off on the school district. And so they did 2 informational meetings, and they let people know they were having them. Only one person showed up, and the comments kind of slowed down just by the fact that they saw this as an opportunity that the district wasn't trying to hide or wasn't trying to be closed to things. And so I think sometimes it is just being transparent. And I think in Catherine's example, I was talking to a superintendent early in the year. They received a letter from a group of constituents, or at least they thought they were constituents, on about 6 topics. And they were addressed to every board member and the superintendent. And our recommendation was not necessarily responding on social media, but if that issue was worthy enough for that interest, then craft a letter in response, send it home to your parents so that they know, and then maybe you post that letter on a Facebook page of the district. So now everybody's hearing the same thing at the same time. And it also tends to put that person that wants to challenge you in a private manner and maybe keep beating you up out in a public manner that you're responding to, and you're saying, here's what our answers are. And sometimes, people are, I see people are more likely now to go out in public and say what they want to, but for others, like doing it in private works for them. But when you put it out there and say, here's the response, things tend to quiet down. So I think responding from the district perspective, rather than a one-on-one between a board member and whoever is writing, is a good direction. Lauren, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for hosting this today. What I like to do is I like to encourage people to use the chain of command. I get on and ask people if they've contacted our superintendent. And most of the time I find that they haven't. When they contact the superintendent, then the post just really doesn't get any attention to it.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, Lauren. Always we would say that, particularly if it's a when we think of our roles and responsibilities, if it's something that's clearly in the administrative side of things, I think always directing citizens, whether you're bumping into them in the grocery store or whether they're posting on your Facebook page, I think it is trying to direct them to go to the appropriate people, and it's often the superintendent is where the board would direct them to. I had a question that came through to me in a direct message from Charles, and it's a great question, Charles. For those that you were at the annual conference this year, we know that we had a racial incident from a person that came in. It wasn't a participant at the hotel or at the conference, came in and made some racial remarks to one of our African-American board members. And Charles was asking just like, where does that issue stand? Where are we at on it? We just had a staff meeting, small group of staff meeting yesterday to review and look at our venues that we do for our association rotation for annual conference. We're going to have some conversations at our board meeting this Friday to talk about it as it relates specifically to venue. And then I think we can also expect for our that there will be a reach out from me out to the larger group of particularly of our minority board members, just to have a more open conversation about making sure that MASB is serving the needs of all of our members in general, Charles. So we're looking at it from a venue perspective, so we don't know the firm answers on that yet. I'm going to talk to the board a little bit on this Friday, and there will be other steps kind of taken. And we did address it with the hotel, at the conference and after the fact. So I'm not, we've been there many years, and so I'm not worried about necessarily another incident. There's some security issues that we took care of for the rest of the conference that we could do again in the future. But we are trying to kind of figure out what's the best route to take. I see you unmuted if you'd like to kind of share your thoughts.
Yes, sir. At the national level, there is an African-American group that responds to those kinds of incidents. Has there been any discussion about creating such a group in MASB?
That is, in fact, why I want to pull together some of our minority board members to see if that is an interest area. I'm not saying for sure that we would do that. Some states have them, some states do not. You might remember for years we did have an urban conference at MASB. So it wasn't specific to African Americans as a minority group, but it was really focused in that space. So that is something that we're willing to explore and figure out what makes the most sense. So more to come, but we are having internal discussions on it, and we will expand those discussions out into the membership.
Thank you.
Yeah, Susan posts, as it relates back to the point that Brad, or the question that Brad brought up, is just referencing board decisions, agenda, and minutes to try to clarify when people post things that are not factual information. And you'll recall probably last summer, critical race theory was a hot issue. I think it still is, and it's still out there. And we had within some communities people saying districts were a part of that districts were teaching this in their curriculum and the teachers were doing this. And I put out a piece to all of our members, to all of you, to give you pointers on possible ways to address that. So that is similar to Brad's point, is you've got a group that is putting something out there on social media and other places that you say is not correct, and you need to figure out a way to try to correct that so that your voters and your constituents know that is not something that maybe you're doing in your district. And you just have to find a concerted way to communicate. One other thing, kind of in that line, Brad and I talked about this last week in a meeting that we had. I had a question come in, actually it was from a reporter, and then I went to talk to Brad about it after. You are seeing as districts probably more than you ever have. I'm sure more than you ever have. People walk into your open, they come to your board meetings, they turn in a comment card. You may have name, address, phone number on there, but all they do is put their name. And we had a reporter that had talked to a district, and that district was, I think in a good conversation, the reporter was fine. They weren't beating up the district, but there was concern raised by the district that if I have 75 people in open comment and public comment, I don't know if 74 of them live in my district or 7 of them live in my district. And as a board, particularly in our larger communities, how do I know if I'm listening to people from outside of my community that are raising concerns that maybe my own constituents don't have? And yet there's no way to determine that. And I'll chime in on this, but the honest answer was to that reporter, at least my point was, and they had brought up another step, was a politician came in and during public comment, stayed within the boundaries of the school policy and spoke for their 3 minutes. And it was topical to things that were coming up in the conversation related to the school. And it was kind of like, well, because it was on an item that others were talking about, whether they're a politician or not, they're a public citizen and can comment. And then for everybody else, there's nothing within our Open Meetings Act that lets you say, hey, you don't live in our district, you don't get to talk, and you don't live in our district, but you need to give us your name and address and phone. Like, Brad, you can chime in, but like, you pretty much, if you have a policy that has open comment and you have to have that, boards have to let anybody have their time based on board policy.
Yeah, that's generally the case, Don. There's always that line that can be drawn, is if it's something's outside of the jurisdiction of the board, then you don't have to hear that. So, someone coming to the meeting and complaining about their next door neighbor's lawn being filled up with trash. Obviously, that's not within the jurisdiction of the board. You send that person down to city council to address that issue. But if topics are indirectly related to the school district, and if you have someone that's running for a public office and this individual is addressing how he or she is going to address these matters if the person gets elected, I think arguably, that kind of is indirectly related to the jurisdiction of the board. I'm not sure if that would be a battle that would be worth fighting to say, no, this is purely campaigning and we're not going to permit that during a public meeting. There's no risk of violating the Campaign Finance Act in terms of using public dollars to support a candidate. So yeah, I would advise under those circumstances, you just give the individual their 3 minutes or whatever you've adopted as a time limit. I did have one other question here, Don.
Sure.
It was a question about an individual participating remotely at a meeting if that person has COVID. Now, since January 1, we no longer have the medical condition exception to participating virtually at a meeting. So if a person has COVID, even though they have a medical condition, they would not be able to participate virtually at a meeting. Now, there was an Attorney General opinion issued in January that looked at accommodating someone with a disability. That would not apply under the circumstances here in this question because having COVID does not amount to having a disability under ADA. Now, a second part to this question was, well, what about the superintendent? If the superintendent has COVID, can he or she participate virtually? And the answer to that is yes, because the virtual meeting requirements or restrictions, however you want to phrase them, only apply to board members, do not apply to your superintendent, do not apply to visitors or presenters to the board. Those folks can participate virtually in a meeting and not have to worry about the restrictions under the Open Meetings Act. And then lastly, this question was within the context of a committee meeting. And whether a committee is subject to the Open Meetings Act or not is a whole completely different analysis and can be complicated. So if your committee meetings are subject to the Open Meetings Act, then yeah, that board member would not be able to participate virtually. The board member has COVID, but if the committee meeting wasn't subject to the Open Meetings Act, then you could have a virtual committee meeting because you don't have to worry about OMA's virtual meeting requirements. Well, hopefully I answered that question for Teresa.
Yeah, and Brad, I know your last point on committees and open meetings does open up a whole other conversation. So
yeah,
if the board member needs to follow up more in that space, you can go directly to Brad through email or a phone call. I see we are at 1 o'clock right now. We always try to recognize your time because you give up this hour, your lunch space, and I really appreciate the participation that you've all put forth again today, the questions that you've shared. Hopefully you found it as valuable as we have. Let's see, Brad, when you say participate, can a board member attend and talk, but not be a part of the quorum and vote? I know where Brad's going, but I'll let you answer it.
Well, I take a very strict interpretation of the virtual meeting participation requirements, and I've been advising districts if the board member can listen in or watch a meeting virtually, but cannot participate, cannot engage in the deliberations, obviously can't vote, and that board member should be marked absent as well. So that's where I've been at on that issue.
All right. Well, I'll finish up, say thank you to everybody. Thank you for everything that you're doing, and thank you for taking the time to share with us. This is, I think, for at least me, and I think for the rest of our staff, we so enjoy being able to interact with our members and hear what's going on in your districts. And we just hope that we're able to share a little bit that makes that job a little bit better for you and a little bit easier for all of you. So have a great remainder of your week, and have everyone take care and be safe.